I will say that we do have a support group here at Risen Savior. I don't know when it meets. I was going to look it up before I came up here. But it does.
Wednesdays at 10.
Wednesdays.
And I know it's 2 weeks a month, but I don't remember which one.
Second and fourth,
There you go.
before soul lunch.
Perfect. And Suzanne is actually the facilitator of that group, and she's also a member of this church. Suzanne Miles. So, any questions? I went through that very quickly. Yes.
I'm wondering if you could give us sort of an example, like, say someone comes dressed backwards, and the spouse knows there's feelings involved, emotion. You want to be kind in how you answer. Give us an example of how you would answer that without,
Okay, so if you are the spouse and your spouse is wearing his clothes backwards, or if you're greeting the couple. Okay, so if someone walks into church, a couple walks into church, and the husband has his clothes on backwards, and the wife is walking with him, and she's kind of like, oh my gosh, here we are. You act like nothing is wrong. You greet them. You hug her, however you typically greet her. Thanks for being here today. Shake his hand. Hey, Jerry, it's great to see you. I'm so glad you're here. Maybe have somebody go with him, try to pull him aside to see if he can turn his shirt around. But really, the beautiful thing about dementia is that he got himself up this morning and he got dressed. Regardless if he put his clothes on backwards or if he's wearing plaid and stripes, and some of us like that, so that's okay too. But it's the little milestones, it's the little things. And yes, it hurts us that this disease robs them of their ability, especially if they were sharp dressers their whole life and they were always very well groomed. It hurts. It hurts to see that. But the best thing that you can do, because they're losing their memories, they're losing the things that are closest to them, is to empower them and to make them feel good about who they are right now. And if their clothes are on backwards, who's it hurting? Now, if his clothes are on backwards and he's falling up the ramp, that's a problem, But otherwise, just greet them as if nothing is happening.
Putting the clothes on backwards must be an accomplishment of some sort.
Absolutely. For me, it's Monday mornings. It's a huge accomplishment, but yes. Yeah, shoes, accommodating, for caregivers who are caring for someone with dementia, trying to take things out of the closet that have a lot of buttons and zippers, replacing it with shirts that are easy to put on, pants that have elastic waists that are easy to put on, shoes that don't tie. Okay, those are all really important things.
How do you respond to somebody that should know you really well, and they say, I really don't know you, what are you doing here? And yet they live in the same house.
Mm-hmm. So you reintroduce yourself every time. When I worked in long-term care, I used to go through every morning, and I worked there for 6 years, and 90% of those people that lived there, I had helped move them there. And I would walk through every morning and I would reintroduce myself. Good morning, Mary. I'm Kelly. It's so great to see you. And some of them would say, Kelly who? And some of them would say, oh, it's so good to see you. Thanks for being here today. So, just reintroducing yourself every time you see them, reassuring them that they're okay and that they're safe and that you love them. I'm Kelly. I'm your wife and I love you. And we're okay. Okay, reorienting them to what's going on right now.
So it's okay to say, if they think that the wife or the spouse is their child, it's okay to respond back and try to make it correct for them?
Mm-hmm. Without correcting them.
Without correcting them.
Mm-hmm. I know that I'm very independent and that I very rarely like to be told what to do unless it's my mother or my boss. Mm-hmm. And so I would prefer if people encourage me instead of belittle me. And so when you're talking with someone who has dementia, empowering them, I'm your daughter. It's so great to see you. If he says, well, no, you're not my daughter. My daughter doesn't look like you. Okay, I'm Carrie. Don't you have a daughter whose name is Carrie? Well, yeah, I do. Well, I bet she's beautiful. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with any of the cognition research that you do today?
Yeah, so there is
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Am I familiar with any of the cognition clinics at the U of A? There are 3 doctors that are actually practicing out of the University of Arizona, Dr. Ahern, Dr. Highshaw, and Dr. Rapchak. They all do neurological testing, and they have an Alzheimer's clinic at the U of A. There are also 2 other clinics in Tucson that do testing. Northwest Neurospecialists, the Center for Neurosciences, and Carondelet has a neurology department as well.
Have these studies sort of validated this list of items that we've been discussing? If you have a zillion people, you could give them the test, and then when they die, maybe analyze the brain and look for agreement, or there may be current neurological tests that they can do tied to the observation.
And that's a great point that I didn't mention, is what are our risk factors for the disease, and where have we come in research? So unfortunately, age is the greatest risk factor for getting Alzheimer's disease. Statistics show that 1 in 3 individuals over the age of 85 and 1 in 9 over the age of 65 will be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And 8 years ago now, when I started working with people that had dementia, it was a disease of exclusion. In other words, we couldn't tell that it was Alzheimer's disease until someone passed away and we did an autopsy of the brain. Research over the last 5 years specifically has gotten us to a point where we can accurately diagnose this disease before someone passes away. In 90% of cases, okay? There's better brain imaging. Because of the research and what they've been able to look for in the brain, they've been able to determine that, okay, if they see an MRI or if they see a CT scan and they do these tests, that yes, that this person does have Alzheimer's disease. But it's still a disease that 100% can't be diagnosed until after they pass away. But that's another part of it, people getting diagnosed earlier. And healthy individuals, so because it runs in my family, I am enrolled in a clinical trial. I'm not taking medications, I'm not doing any of that, but they are looking at my brain on a regular basis to watch how my brain progresses through the disease, because I want to be that change in the future. And that's why it's really important that we start talking about it now. So research primarily, we're not to a point where we have an effective treatment. Some of our hopeful drugs, there was an immunization that they were giving that we were really hopeful about in the phase 3 trials that did not go through. And so we're still studying a lot of things. We're studying glucose in the brain, a lot of the relationships between changes in the brain, visual spatial, and Alzheimer's disease. So there's lots of different types of research going on, but that's the most promising. There was also a recent study released that they have now identified 11 new genetic factors related to Alzheimer's disease in late onset or later onset for those that are 85 and older. So genetics plays a role. If it runs in your family, you are at a greater risk. Those women here in the room, unfortunately, we're at a greater risk than men, primarily because we live longer.
Is there anything we can do when we know it's in our family to help,
Reduce your risk?
Build new neurons, you know?
Eating right, exercising, brain games, learn a new language. It will help to reduce your risk. If you've been doing crossword puzzles for the last 50 years, do your crossword puzzle and then go do Sudoku. Okay, Stretch your brain the same way you stretch your body. Learn a new language. Go take a class at the U of A or Oasis or wherever that really engages you. Keep social. That's really important. Staying social, exercising and eating. That helps to reduce your risk. There are some genetic factors that play a role, so I can't say that if you do all of those things that you won't get it. But it does help to reduce your risk by doing those things.
But earlier you gave an example of this professor or doctor who got up and was ready to give a presentation and it didn't come out right. Mm-hmm. And yet he is a very knowledgeable person in his head. Mm-hmm. Why would someone who's so knowledgeable get it and somebody who's just plain ordinary not get it?
You know, there was a great study, and it's kind of an old study now, so they're not using it as often, but it's a nun study. And it was a study of two nuns that were living in a convent since childhood. They were born there, lived the same life, ate the same foods, went to sleep at the same time. You know, life was very structured. Later in life, one had an onset of Alzheimer's disease and one did not. Upon autopsy, they found that both actually had the plaques and tangles that we often relate to in Alzheimer's disease, but one showed symptoms and one did not. So, you know, this disease does not know any boundaries, no barriers. You know, we talk about doing things to really help ourselves to stay healthy. Reducing your risk of chronic illness is really important, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to get it. I work, you know, with a lady who was the dean of the School of Nursing at the U of A who did rounds at the Alzheimer's clinic. You know, so it just, you know, it's tragic. Thank you for having me this afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here.